Hey everyone, Shaun Stevenson here, author of the Throne series, and today is a little bit of a different video. This is kind of my mid-roll BookTube newbie tag video. I actually never did the BookTube newbie tag back when I first started this channel, and I thought, you know what? Why don't we do a little bit of a mid-roll BookTube newbie tag? Because I would love to tell you more about this channel, about who I am, and let you get to know me a tiny bit, because it's fun to see these kind of videos on other people's channels. So I've got the questions queued up. I'm ready to roll. Let's talk about it. So the first question is, why did you start this channel? Well, I started this channel because I have always loved books. I have loved reading for so long, and I'm going to talk about my first reading and all that later, but I have always loved reading. I think it's so much fun. It is a great escape into so many different worlds. You can step into almost any world through a book, and I think that's so amazing. It's also an incredible thing to enter into other people's minds, which, okay, gonna sound a little philosophical, but and maybe a little creepy, I don't know. But you do enter into other people's minds when you read their books. You're actually hearing the words that they thought in their head that they put onto paper. And so I think it's an interesting thing to see, like, who are other authors and what are they writing and why are they writing what they're writing. I very much am a person who likes to think about the why behind a book. Like, why did they write this? What compelled them to put this story onto paper? So I really think that's interesting, and I love talking about books, and frankly, my wife is tired of me talking to her about them. So she was like, go talk to the YouTubes about all of those books. I only have so much capacity for books. So that's kind of, joke, but wink. So she definitely was like, definitely go just try it, see what you think. And I have really been enjoying talking about books. I feel like there are so many books to talk about, and I barely scratched the surface. Like, I feel like I have so many books that I love, and so many books I've read, so many genres I love, that I haven't even barely started talking about on this channel, and I am just so excited about that. I think it's so much fun to talk about books and talk about these worlds and characters and plots and plot twists and all of the things. It's just so much fun to me. So that's why. So question 2 is, what are some fun and unique things you bring to BookTube? So, A, I'm a positive person. I guess I said that with some snark, though. So, I am a positive person, though, so I do think I bring some positivity and fun in that sense, because I definitely... I'm not a downer, if you know what I mean. If you have ever heard of the Enneagram, I know I'm a millennial, so Enneagram. But anyways, if you've ever heard of the Enneagram, I'm an Enneagram 7, which are the enthusiast. So they're the people who love stuff and love to talk about things and just enjoy having a party kind of idea. That's me. I love that kind of thing. So I definitely have that aspect. I also am a middle grade book reader. I usually only read middle grade and YA fantasy, science fiction, and horror books. I don't really read a lot of other stuff. So I'm not going to be reading like literary fiction. It's really boring to me. And I know some people love it, and I appreciate it for the art that it is. And I recognize we would not be where we are today in the book world without Shakespeare and Jane Austen and these greats of literature. I just don't like reading their books. I can appreciate them all day long, and I will always say they have written good books. But I will not personally be talking about them probably on this channel. So I read middle grade YA, science fiction, fantasy, and horror books. That's like what I like to read, and so that's what I like to talk about. Also, I am a Christian, and so I read not only books that are just in the mainstream kind of, all the different books that are out there, but I also read Christian fiction, which I don't think it's talked about on YouTube very much, especially some of the more, okay, so some of the stuff that's like not romance and things like that don't get really talked about ever, and so I love talking about books. So obviously I'm going to talk about some of the books that I read as a kid and the books I still read, and that's fun to me. So I bring some interesting things to the table, I think, that are a lot of fun. I definitely have quite the collection of middle grade and YA fantasy, sci-fi, and horror books. So some of them are behind me now, and some of them are across the room and things like that. So that is me. So question number 3. What have been some of the most exciting parts of being a booktuber so far? I think without a doubt it is the community. There are so many awesome people here on BookTube, and it is so much fun to talk to them and see what kind of books they're reading, see what recommendations they have. I love watching other people's booktubes when they talk about middle grade and YA because it's just fun to see what is out there that I don't even know about, because I recognize I do not have a corner on the market. There are so many books out there, and there's definitely more than I could ever read. So I want to know what other people are reading and what fun books they're finding. So I love being a part of that. I think that is just so much fun and so exciting. Number 4, why do you love reading? Well, I kind of already said this a little bit, but I love just stepping into other worlds, seeing what people come up with, the stories they tell. I love exciting stories, adventure stories. I love stories that have a good plot twist. That is my favorite thing in a book. If a book can surprise me and give me a really good plot twist, that book has won the day. If I gasp out loud at a book, I almost always give it a 5-star review, because it's a little bit rare that it happens, but it does happen sometimes where I come across something that I never expected. A good example for me is Percy Jackson in the Heroes of Olympus series in book number 1, The Lost Hero. If you've read that book, you know there's a plot twist about halfway through that book that I never saw coming. And I thought, that is so genius. I never would have thought of this. And I love this development. And I think it's so interesting. And what are you going to do with this? So that is a great example to me of a plot twist that I loved. I thought it was so good. The other book that I really loved that had such a good plot twist was Saint by Ted Dekker. That book is a Christian adult fantasy horror book, actually, but it had an amazing plot twist halfway through that I remember setting the book down because I had to process what had just happened to the book. So I loved it. So that's really why I love reading. I love just the stories and adventure and the things that go on in the world, and I'm okay with it moving me a little bit in an emotional way too. I think that's a great journey as well. I like that a little bit. I don't like a ton of that because I don't like to be sad. I'm not gonna lie. So, question number 5. What book or series got you into reading? So the book series that I actually remember reading when I was young is the Wizard of Oz book series. The Lost Princess of Oz is the first book I remember reading that was a long book that I read by myself. And I'm pretty sure I read it in 2nd grade. So I loved those books. I got them all the time. And so those books, because of their exploration and fantasy and adventure, that is really what got me hooked on reading, I think, fantasy books in particular. I always have loved fantasy stories. I think it's my number 1 genre. I just love those books. I devour them when I read them. I think they're so much fun. So definitely the Oz series is what got me going on reading books, to be honest. Number 6, what questions would you ask your favorite booktubers? Well, I've gotten to ask them some because I've already asked them and when they have Q&As and things, and that's so much fun. One of my favorite questions to ask booktubers is, what's a book that people would be surprised that you love? I think that's such an interesting question because usually it kind of gets booktubers to their outlier book that's kind of different from the rest of the books they read. And I always think that's really interesting to see, like, what people think about and what books are kind of on the fringe of their favorites. I think that's just really a fascinating question. Question 7, what challenges have you faced so far being a booktuber? I think the biggest challenge for me being a booktuber so far has been just getting to the books I want to read. Like, there's so many books, and I am reading so much more lately than I have in so long, and I'm loving it. I actually finished grad school a little under a year ago, and if you've ever been in grad school, you know it's a lot of reading. You are just kind of reading, and you're reading good stuff usually, because in grad school you've usually chosen something that you're interested in, so you're reading something you're interested in some level, but it's a lot of reading, assigned reading. And so I did not have as much time for fun reading as I do now, and I actually didn't go through much of a slump of finding myself being burnt out from reading after grad school. So I definitely have been reading nonstop. I've been loving it, and it's been so much fun to be back reading again. I'm really enjoying it. I think it's a great thing to do. So I think that's just been one of the biggest challenges is there's so many books I want to get to and so little time. And I just want to keep reading. But, life and jobs and all those sorts of things also exist. So I got to keep going on those things. So I think that's been the biggest challenge. But it's not like a burnout challenge or a burnout type of thing at all. I've really been enjoying it. So question number 8 is, when did you start reading? Well, I started reading when I was very young. I actually started writing as well when I was very young. In first grade, I wrote my first story. I love writing. I love reading. And so when I was very, very young, I remember reading all kinds of books. I remember, like I said, the Wizard of Oz series. I also loved Garfield comics. I would always check those out from the library, and magic trick books. I love magic tricks too. I do a lot of magic trick stuff. I do like library shows and different things like that. So that's a fun thing that I like to do on the side. But so I like magic trick books. I read those as a kid. I read a lot of different like Flintstones comics and Jetsons comics and all these kinds of things that I'd find at the library and just check out and read. And so that's really when I started reading was very young. My parents were very great about reading books to us and getting books for us as presents as kids. And so they really instilled in us a love of reading. My brothers and my sister and I, we all love to read. Question number 9, where do you read? Everywhere. I'm not even kidding. I have a belief. You should always have a book with you, no matter where you go, no matter where you are. So I have a book at my office where I work. I work for a church. I'm a children's pastor. And so I always have a book in my office. I actually have multiple books in my office. It's like one of the other places I have tons of books, but I'll talk about that in a minute. But I have a belief you should always have books with you wherever you go. So I have a book in my office. I also always have a book in the car. I keep a book in my backpack. And obviously I have all my books at my house. So I always believe in having books to read everywhere you go. So I read in all kinds of places. I'll read sitting on the couch. I'll read sitting in the car, when I'm parked and I'm waiting for someone in a store, that kind of a thing. When I have a easy chair that I like to sit in my office here in this room. So there's just, I will read wherever I am, anywhere. I like to get 7,000 steps a day, that kind of thing. And even sometimes while I'm doing my steps, if I haven't finished yet, I will be reading a book and walking in a circle in our living room, getting my steps. I know I'm a weirdo, but hey, that's what this is for. So I just love to read anywhere, anytime, any place, anything. I don't actually read that many ebooks though, and I don't really do audiobooks. I have done some audiobooks, but I more did those like if I'm going on a really long car ride or a car trip, then I'll do an audiobook, or if I'll do an ebook if it's something that I can get for free. I'll do an ebook then, but I don't usually do ebooks otherwise. I like to read in physical format, which is definitely probably a bookish problem, but that's just me. That's what libraries are for. That's what used bookstores are for. So you can find those books for cheaper or for free. Question 10, what kinds of books do you like to read? Well, like I said, I love to read YA and middle grade fantasy, sci-fi, and horror. Those are my 3 genres I love, especially fantasy. That's my number one. I love fantasy books. I love all kinds of fantasy. I tend towards, I kind of go through different phases. Sometimes I really like epic fantasy, that is Elseworlds kind of fantasy. I like some Portal fantasy, but sometimes it gets a little overdone. I also like a little bit of magical realism fantasy. I really like Frank L. Cole's series about potions. He has like kind of a magical realism to it, or like a Percy Jackson kind of book where there's a lot of real world stuff, but there's also this whole fantasy overlay. So I don't love the tiny bit of fantasy, and I'm not a romantasy fan. I don't mind if a fantasy book has a romance in it, but I'm not really into romantasy. And I know some people love it, and that's cool. You can love that. That's totally fine. You can like it. I just don't personally love it. I have read some romance books before, though, so I'm not like unaware of the genre or never dabbled in it. I just don't love it as much. The romance books I would tend towards are romantic comedy type books. I think those are more fun than other ones, but really, fantasy books are my bread and butter. Love them. I also really do love horror type books. I think they're a lot of fun, especially in the YA middle grade, because I will admit sometimes I'm a little bit of a wimp when it comes to horror. I like the YA middle grade horror because it's not as intense usually as adult horror. And so I like that it's a little, I can kind of have some scares and be a little afraid, but then I can sleep at night, So that is my mid-roll booktube newbie tag video. I hope you enjoyed this. If you want to use these questions, I'll put them down in the comments below so you can use them if you want to do this too. But otherwise, thanks so much for joining me on this. Let me know in the comments below, what are your favorite books? What's just like one of your favorites? Doesn't have to be your favorite, because I know that's hard. That's really hard to choose. So what's one of your favorite books? Write it in the comments below. I'd love to hear more from you. And until next time, everybody, keep reading. Bye.